It's an 8-armed octopus. And if you take just trafficking out, that arm will grow back. You have to take the head.
So in the end, he obviously did himself, just like Jeffrey Epstein.
850,000. That's how many children he says are missing.
2 men, no reason to lie, no career left to protect. One of them stood in front of every powerful person in Hollywood and said the unsayable to their faces. The other walked away from one of the biggest careers in cinema to make a film they never wanted you to see. And the thing they have been saying separately, publicly, on camera for years is the same thing. But here's what nobody is connecting. There is a moment that tells you everything you need to know about how Hollywood protects itself, and it happened in front of millions of people on live television. January 2020, the Golden Globes. Ricky Gervais is hosting for the 5th time. 5 times he stood at that microphone in front of the people who control what you watch, what you hear, and what you are allowed to think about. And 5 times he used it like a weapon. But 2020 was different. He opened with a bit about his show Afterlife. A man struggling after his wife dies of cancer, and then, almost casually, like he was finishing a sentence he had been holding for years, he said it.
So in the end, he obviously did himself, just like Jeffrey Epstein. Shut up! I know he's your friend, but I don't care.
The room didn't laugh. It didn't gasp. It went quiet. And that silence told you everything. Because in that room were people who had reportedly flown on Epstein's plane, people who had attended his dinners, people who had smiled for photographs on his island and then returned to their lives as though none of it had ever happened. Gervais wasn't doing a bit. He was holding up a mirror. And nobody in that room wanted to look. He kept going. He told them they were in no position to lecture anyone about anything. He told them the companies they worked for, Apple, Amazon, Disney, were running operations overseas that would make their speeches about dignity ring hollow. He told them to take their awards, thank their agents, and keep their mouths shut.
You're in no position to lecture the public about anything. You know nothing about the real world.
The cameras kept trying to cut away. Gervais kept talking. And the message from that room, the silence, the discomfort, the tight smiles was unmistakable. He had named something they needed to stay unnamed, and they hated him for it. Now, connect that room to a man who was doing something far more dangerous than a Golden Globes monologue. Because while Gervais was saying the unsayable in a ballroom in Beverly Hills, Jim Caviezel was in Colombia watching children being sold in broad daylight. Jim Caviezel's career peak was undeniable. The Passion of the Christ, one of the highest-grossing independent films in cinema history. He was, by any measure, an A-list name, and then he made a decision that Hollywood could not forgive. He chose Sound of Freedom, a film based on real events, real rescues, real children following a former government agent who leaves his career to pull kids out of trafficking networks across Latin America. During production in Colombia, Caviezel and his crew didn't just recreate this world, they witnessed it.
You know, when we were down in Cartagena, the guys would come up, traffickers, and they would, right in front of us, ask us if we wanted niñas or niños, and little boys or little girls.
In broad daylight, in front of a film crew, in a city that tourists visit on a regular afternoon, not a dark corner of the world, an open market. And open markets exist because there is demand. Caviezel brought the finished film back to Hollywood expecting, at minimum, distribution, a chance to be seen. Instead, the doors closed. Major studios passed. Networks went quiet. Reports emerged, and these are reported claims that powerful figures with the reach to make or break careers had made their position clear. Supporting that movie was a non-starter.
And we were humiliated. We were taken through the ringer in the media. This was before Trump came out and said it was, the lying media and the fake news. And they were fake news back when we were doing that, but we had to fight for everything we had.
Ask yourself that question slowly. Why would anyone in power work this hard to suppress a film about saving children? What does burying that story protect? The answer Caviezel keeps returning to is structural. He is not describing isolated bad actors. He is describing a system. And a system, by definition, requires protection from many directions at once. When the Epstein files dropped December 19, 2025, then a second wave, January 30th, 2026, the public braced for a handful of familiar names. What they got was a directory, 3 million pages, 95,000 photos, flight logs, emails, FBI documents, celebrities, politicians, philanthropists' names appearing not once but repeatedly across multiple documents in multiple contexts. And then, as it always does, cable news picked 3 names, debated them for a week, and moved on to the next story. Caviezel had predicted this, not the files specifically, but the response to them, the way they would be processed, packaged, and quietly set aside. He said it before the files dropped. He said it before 1.1 million people watched a single clip of him in under 10 hours because the world finally caught up to what he had been saying.
A lot of agencies are involved at the highest level. The agencies that were supposed to stop this are part of this.
Let's get specific, because this is where the reported connections stop being rumor and start being pattern. Bill Gates' multiple documented visits to Epstein properties over multiple years, photos, and ultimately, in his own words, an admission that Epstein reportedly held damaging information about him. Gates called it, according to reports, a mistake. A man worth over $100 billion, with armies of lawyers and advisors, reportedly made a mistake by repeatedly visiting a convicted offender's properties. Prince Andrew, according to released documents, several hundred emails between his office and Epstein's. A 2011 email, after a damaging photograph became public, in which Andrew reportedly wrote words that were entered into the record.
I'm just as concerned for you, don't worry about me. It would seem we are in this together and will have to rise above it.
We are in it together. That is not the language of someone accidentally photographed near a bad person at a charity event. That is the language of partnership. And when Congress opened an investigation in January 2026 and called both Bill and Hillary Clinton to testify, they declined.
I don't remember anything about it.
He doesn't remember. Now, here's the question Caviezel keeps coming back to, and it is the question that unlocks everything else. If these are the names that made it into documents released after years of legal battles, how many names did not make it out? How many meetings happened on islands that were not Little St. James? How many flights landed on private strips that appear in no log? How many transactions occurred in jurisdictions that will never cooperate with an American federal investigation? The network did not need Epstein. Epstein was useful because he was willing to be the face of it. Now that the face is gone, the network, according to Caviezel's public testimony and his repeated on-record statements, simply operates without one. Here is how a network at this level survives exposure. It does not hide in the dark. It wraps itself in the light. It puts the most trusted, most celebrated faces it can find right at the front of the operation. Not necessarily as participants, but as validators. People whose very presence makes everything around them look clean, look humanitarian, look like the kind of thing you would donate to. Caviezel has a name for this role. He calls it a legitimizing force. The name he points to most frequently in this context, and this must be stated carefully, is Oprah Winfrey. Her name does not appear in the DOJ Epstein files as a participant. What Caviezel is pointing to is not a document. It is a pattern, and the pattern is what makes this so difficult to look away from. Harvey Weinstein. For years, Oprah was publicly among his closest Hollywood allies, introducing him to young actresses, lending him her credibility at a time when, as we now know, dozens of women were being harmed behind closed doors. John of God, a Brazilian faith healer she promoted to a global audience across multiple episodes of her show, who was later convicted of serially assaulting hundreds of women. His history, investigators later noted, could have been surfaced with basic research. Oprah gave him a stage and a credibility boost that money could not buy. And then, her school in South Africa, opened in 2007, celebrated as a humanitarian triumph, followed almost immediately by abuse allegations, a settlement behind closed doors, and then a pivot, a philanthropy surge, a powerful speech about believing survivors. Suddenly, she is not adjacent to the problem. She is positioned as the solution to it.
Children are being sucked into the deepest recesses of hell.
Caviezel's point is structural. A network operating at this level, with this much money, this much access, this much global reach, requires legitimizers, people whose names and faces make everything around them look safe. And whether those people know the full picture or not, they serve a function. They are the reason the system stays invisible. When you understand that function, you begin looking at every celebrity friendship, every philanthropic partnership, every high-profile endorsement very differently. Because the question is not just who was on the island. The question is who made the island look normal. Caviezel has been open about what all of this has cost him. Professionally, he was blacklisted. The man who played Jesus in one of the highest-grossing films in cinema history could not get a major studio to return his calls, not because his project was bad, because it was inconvenient. The director of Sound of Freedom, the film Caviezel, gave years of his life to publicly distance himself from his own lead actor because Caviezel was talking too openly about child trafficking. The director of a film about child trafficking went on record to say that his actor was talking too much about child trafficking. Let that sit. Gervais understood the cost too. He stood in that room in 2020 in front of every person with the power to end his career, and said what he said anyway. 5 years later, the names he gestured at are showing up in federal documents. And then there is the reported story of Anne Heshe Ellen DeGeneres' former partner. People close to her have said publicly that by 2022 she had been working on a documentary called Children of the Machine, in which she was reportedly putting into words things she had witnessed, things connected to powerful people, things that once spoken on camera would make her a liability. In August 2022, she died in a single-car crash in Los Angeles. High speed, the car caught fire. Toxicology found drugs in her system. Official conclusion, accident. People close to her have consistently and publicly said they do not accept that conclusion. We are reporting what those people have said. We are not stating it as confirmed fact, but understand the context. Epstein died in a camera-free, witness-free, cellmate-transferred federal prison cell. The official conclusion there was also accepted quietly, and the people who would have been most catastrophically damaged by what he knew never had to answer a single question in a courtroom.
Epstein Island isn't the only island out there.
Jim Caviezel testified before Congress. He put 850,000 missing children on the official record. He asked elected officials on camera whether the three-letter agencies knew about this. The response from those agencies has been, predictably, almost nothing. And that non-response, Caviezel argues, only has two possible explanations. Either they did not know which, given the surveillance infrastructure and billions spent on federal law enforcement, would represent catastrophic incompetence, or they did know. And if they did know, the question stops being about incompetence and starts being about something far more uncomfortable. The files are backward-looking. They document what happened on one island, around one man, during a specific window of time. They do not and cannot document what is allegedly happening now on the other islands, the ones without famous names on the manifest, the ones owned by people careful enough never to appear in Epstein's contact list, the ones operating in jurisdictions with no legal obligation to cooperate with American investigators. The demand that Epstein was reportedly servicing did not come from broke people. It came from people with private jets, offshore accounts, and international property portfolios. And those people, the ones in the files and the ones not yet in the files, did not suddenly lose their appetite when Epstein stopped breathing. Ricky Gervais said the unsayable in a room full of people who needed it to stay unsaid. Jim Caviezel walked away from Hollywood's biggest tables to make a film about children nobody in power wanted you to see. Whistleblowers are stepping forward right now, knowing the cost, doing it anyway. The files are still being unsealed. The names are still emerging. Investigations that were quietly shelved are being reopened, and the silence from the people with the most to lose the kind of silence that once felt like protection is starting to feel like something else entirely. Something that rhymes with fear. 3 million pages, 95,000 photos. A man dead in federal custody. A director distancing himself from his own actor. 850,000 children unaccounted for. And a system funded, protected, globally connected that has been operating for decades. The question was never whether Epstein's network existed. The files confirmed that. The question is who is running the version of it that does not have a name yet. Drop your answer in the comments. I read every single one. And if this video reached you, if this made you feel something, share it. Because the only thing more dangerous to this system than Jim Caviezel talking is millions of people listening.